World leaders and business giants have gathered in the Swiss resort of Davos for the annual World Economic Forum. Over 3,000 attendees will discuss political, commercial, and environmental issues, which this year is the hot topic. Now, the founder of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, has been omnipresent since the creation. And in his synopsis of the forum this year, he recognized the need to address more than just business issues. However, business is clearly still the priority.
We are looking very much forward because this is a global conference. We are putting a lot of emphasis on dealing with the global issues, and climate is the key global issue at this moment.
Well, the main headlines covering the event prior to its opening was a potential clash. This was reported a lot before the actual summit. Clash between the Swedish environment activist Greta Thunberg and the US President Donald Trump. Upon her arrival, she came with a very clear message to all.
To the world leaders and those in power, I would like to say that you haven't seen anything yet. You have not seen the last of us. We can assure you that. And that is the message that we will bring to the World Economic Forum in Davos next week.
Greta Thunberg there. Hello and welcome to Economic Divide with me, Kavita Akwai. This week's show, we will be looking back on the events that dominated the World Economic Forum in Davos and examine how global awareness and momentum surrounding the environmental issues is spoiling the party of the rich and the famous. The main event at Davos has been the ongoing debate between Greta Thunberg and Donald Trump. However, a lot more has been going on at the World Economic Forum, so let's have a look at the other news hitting the WEF headlines. Billionaire philanthropist George Soros announced a $1 billion donation to fund a new university network, reaching out to the underprivileged and creating a learning platform for everyone to join. Soros also used the forum to criticize Facebook, which he claimed was assisting Donald Trump in gaining a second term in office, and took the opportunity to label Trump as a con man and ultimate narcissist. Criticism has also come about in the form of sexism, with many claiming that the WEF is too male-dominated. With 76% of those attending this year being male, only 682 of the attendees were women. Well, Germany's finance minister, it turns out, has stated that he is confident that the EU and the US will strike a trade deal in the near future. Olaf Scholz stated that the deal could come in the form of digital taxes, particularly concerning the bilateral automobile trade. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Davos, Switzerland, home to the World Economic Forum's annual gathering, a hub for the world's richest and most elite to strike a pose in front of cameras and complete billion-dollar deals, surrounded by pristine Swiss Alps air, melting fondues, and as much media attention as they can handle. However, there's a dark side to the events at Davos, with 1% of the world's population controlling 99% of the world's wealth. Is this just a luxury rich man's club? And are the guests at this event solely in attendance to promote their own greed and interests?
I think Davos is a rich man's club, and there's not much disagreement with that out in the wider world. Davos pretends to care about inequality and fighting climate change, but it can't be the solutions to those problems, because the billionaires who go to Davos have caused these problems. So in fact, we need to go further and say that it's time billionaires were abolished. We don't need anyone to have that much wealth and that much power. It's insane to have single individuals with that much power and wealth. And it's time for Davos to end. This one should be the last.
Even though the leaders of the world's largest economies are pledging to do more to tighten the gap between rich and poor, there are, however, underlying tones of hypocrisy at Davos. The US President Donald Trump made it quite clear that he was in Davos to promote US interests, labelling the US as an optimistic economic power, and hence embracing the presence of so many global business leaders and selling the US PLC as the go-to place. Yet, in spite of being here to promote US interests, why then is Davos not being used as a forum to reduce the economic divide between rich and poor? Are in fact the rich getting richer? And if so, at whose expense?
The rich are getting richer. We've seen this week that billionaires now have more wealth than 60% of the world's entire population. It's very, very extreme. And that's happening at the expense of all of us.
On a more global scale, Trump has also used the event to cement his ties with China, following the signing on the tariffs deal between the two states prior to Davos taking place. With the two global economies both working to expand their interests, what then is left for the remaining nations who have come to Davos to promote their own interests too? And what of those who have not been invited or had to cancel? The assassination of Lieutenant General Qasem Soleimani has created global tension, and Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif has withdrawn from attending. With global capitalism at an all-time high, has the exclusion of some hence shown that this is unliberal liberalism at its very highest order, as certain powers exert their force onto others, picking their team players as and how they choose, with the sole intention of gaining at the expense of others.
Mahan Abedin joins us now. He's our current affairs and impact analyst. Mahan, welcome. So let's begin with the Davos 2020. A lot of loud speakers on Greta and Trump as the focus. Obviously, a reflection of how climate change ranks very high at this Davos. What are your thoughts about the Davos 2020?
Well, I think it was pretty uneventful. I think it wasn't really a departure from what we've had in years gone by. You really have to question the impact of this global forum. I mean, what impact does it really have on the issues that they're discussing? It certainly doesn't have any policy-related impacts. I mean, the rhetoric might be important in terms of shaping global public opinion.
Of course, talking about Davos altogether, the fact that it's held every year, and then looking at the achievements throughout all these years, especially on topics like inequality, etc., it doesn't look like a lot has been achieved in terms of the progression that you would like to see.
Yeah, and because these big topics are stalemated: the climate, global inequality, and while it's worthwhile having this global talking shop every year where influential types and leaders come together to discuss the issues, but I think one really has to question the impact of this forum on actual policies that will make a difference.
Finally, a topic that is of great interest around the world, especially when you take a look at the capabilities between the U.S. and China in particular, is artificial intelligence. Now, the one particular topic, New York Times reported, artificial intelligence is starting to play a role in the classrooms as a replacement maybe for the teacher. How do you see that?
Well, I think this is a natural progression about what's been happening for the past decade or so. We've had remote learning, or children or even young adults studying remotely through webcams, Skype, what have you. And this is just a natural progression to that. I don't think you'll ever replace that actual human teacher. There's no replacement for that. Just as there's no replacement for a book, a physical book, because we like to touch it, feel it. The same with teachers, they have to be there. But will AI have an impact on learning? Possibly. But then they have to identify a niche, a real need, where AI can intervene in places that teachers are failing. Problem pupils, for example, children that have difficulty relating to a teacher, or children who are disruptive in class. Maybe AI could make a difference. But is it going to revolutionize the classroom? I don't think so. Not in the foreseeable future.
Very well. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate it, Mahan. It's always a pleasure having you here in the studios. Well, that does it for this section. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at more of the developments coming out of Davos. Davos, as mentioned, is a forum that is highly dominated by senior figures in the international political economy. Representatives from 91 countries attended this year's event, with 53 of these listed as the head of a state or head of a government. Now, there were 17 banking and investment companies attending Davos, each to have sent a 5-person delegate. 6 members from the Bank of America, BlackRock, Citibank, Goldman Sachs, HSBC, and Sberbank will also be in attendance. Now, with the theme this year being dominated by environmental issues, car usage has dominated spending for the U.S. delegation, with, well, $34,000 to have been spent on Ivanka Trump's shuttling, $736,000 on White House staff travel, and over $300,000 for Donald Trump's entourage and hotel bills, taking the total spending for a whopping $4 million, this being for a 2-day trip. Well, a report by the Swiss bank UBS stated that the intentions declared in Davos to fight climate change are not enough. The $600 billion already invested in climate finance is less than a fifth of the sum needed to decarbonize the world's energy supply. The Django social startup studio has announced in Davos that it will pledge 60 million euros dedicated to financing tech-enabled startups in Africa, with a 15 million euro anchor investment from the European Investment Bank. Well, the world's 2,153 billionaires have more wealth between them than 4.6 billion people worldwide. If someone saved $10,000 a day since the building of the pyramids in Egypt, they would still not be as rich as the top 5 billionaires on the list, many of whom attended Davos.
Long prior to the doors of the WEF welcoming its prestigious guests onto the slopes of Davos, there has been an ongoing feud between climate activists and global world leaders, with none more so public than the feud between Donald Trump and Greta Thunberg. The Swedish climate activist shook the world with her emotional message last year, questioning whether world leaders were evil and how they dared to place the onus of responsibility onto younger generations.
People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you!
The debate continued in the corridors of Davos as Greta and Trump exchanged words again, with Trump labelling climate change as nonsense, as he claimed this was no time to panic.
This is not a time for pessimism. This is a time for optimism. Fear and doubt is not a good thought process, because this is a time for tremendous hope and joy and optimism and action. But to embrace the possibilities of tomorrow, we must reject the perennial prophets of doom and their predictions of the apocalypse.
Greta, however, maintained her rhetoric of requiring immediate action, highlighting the fact that the world is on fire, and the action being taken is too little, too late.
No political ideology or economic structure has been able to tackle the climate and environmental emergency and create a cohesive and sustainable world.
So with Trump labelling the climate activists as prophets of doom, is this a clear example of Trump openly denying climate change?
Well, it is on the one hand, and it's not just denying climate change. In my view, it goes much further, because even if he didn't deny climate change, he would still deny the urgency to act on it. Because basically calling climate activists prophets of doom, it's on the one hand discrediting us for kind of panic mongerers, but it's also saying that we who point to the urgency are actually exaggerating and also putting US interests forward, whereas US interests are actually tightly connected to taking action on climate change.
With the climate change debate so heavily listed on the World Economic Forum debate, one key question that arises is the notion that those that can make a difference in the world may not be genuine enough in their promises and their pledges. Well, joining me in the studio today is Cameron Hepburn, Professor of Environmental Economics and the Director of the Smith School of Enterprise and Environment at the University of Oxford. His publications include pieces on energy, resources, and environmental challenges across a range of disciplines. Professor Hepburn, looking at the World Economic Forum, can you please give me a brief rundown on the correlation between economics and the environment?
Well, the discussions at Davos this week actually encapsulate a question that I've been asked by people for the last 20 years. When I tell them I'm a professor of environmental economics, they say, well, those two things don't go together, do they? The economy and the environment, surely they're at odds. And actually, they don't need to be. And I'd go further than that. I think the Davos discussions are starting to really properly reflect this fact that actually you can't have a thriving economy if you don't have a functioning set of ecosystems and environment that underpins our prosperity in economic terms.
Well, it's fair to argue that humans have a selfish and greedy nature as we strive to ascertain more consumer goods as prices become more competitive. Therefore, there's sure to be large side effects on the environment due to mass production and consumerism. Are we doing enough to make a difference as humans?
Well, the tragedy and the beauty here is that we're not doing things in a very smart way. And I say it's a tragedy because, of course, a lot of our natural environment's being destroyed because of it. The beauty is that there's an awful lot of room to improve, and the two can go hand in hand, environmental protection and economic prosperity, by being far more clever in the way that we use our resources. And this is not beyond the collective wit of humanity. We are improving the way in which we get our energy. It's becoming far more clean. We're rethinking the food system and the way we use land. And the direction of travel is increasingly looking positive. I mean, there's an awful lot of work to be done in not a lot of time on the climate side. So, I'm not minimizing the scale of the challenge, but I think these two things can be harmonized, even allowing for human nature as it is.
Thank you so much for that, Professor Cameron Hepburn, there with an interesting perspective on the events taking place at the World Economic Forum 2020. Time for a quick break. Coming up, we will take a look at the effects of globalization on the world economy, as well as examining the winners and losers in a globalized world. Also look at the rise of populism and its influence on how states develop tendencies to operate solely in their own interests when conducting business, while ignoring the consequences of their actions on the wider global audience. Also take a look at how protests are having an impact on the World Economic Forum name. With a host of issues directly related to topics being discussed at Davos, we ask, is enough being done? And are the likes of Greta Thunberg enough to make a global change? So stay with us. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back to Economic Divide with me, Kavitah Waheed. Now, over the last 3 decades, the world has grown smaller, not in size, but in connectivity. The likes of improved communications, the internet, and the ability to trade anywhere in the globe at the click of a button have brought the world closer together. Yet amongst the ever-growing demand for consumer goods, there's the notion that not all parties in the chain from producer to consumer are on an equal scale in the global economic divide between the rich and the poor.
The world is in a stage of transition not seen since the end of the Cold War. With capitalism essentially defeating communism, the world became obsessed with consumerism, and companies lapped up the opportunity to meet the demand. With the global village effect making the world smaller, globalization has certainly given us a chance to experience its benefits. However, could this system now be on the rocks? The fact that there are now multiple emerging powers across the globe has given the US version of capitalism a real notion of competition. The winners of the globalization theory are few, as they rise high above the poorer South, who have not benefited from the cause, but in fact lost out, making the North-South divide as wide as the rich-poor divide that it resembles, only on a global scale. But the voices of discontent are beginning to be heard, not only in the realms of climate change, but also in the right to equality and a fairer distribution of wealth.
If you just look around the world, more than 30 countries are seeing protests. People are on the streets, and what are they saying? That they're not going to accept this inequality. They're not going to live with these conditions.
The executive chairman of the WEF, Klaus Schwab, made it clear in his opening speech about the aims of the 2020 forum that the solution was to provide jobs as well as tackle climate change. But like many of the guests he invited, is this just a smokescreen to add to the already polluted words of senior business leaders and politicians? Globalization is being adversely affected by the rise of populism around the world. Right-wing politics are slowly identifying the fact that nationalism is now starting to rise against globalism, and the fact that even Trump has endlessly said that America first is the way forward. Could this meeting in Davos then be the last goodbye for world leaders, who must now embrace that the winds of change are happening and accept that the world is no longer standing up for their divisive ways?
Greta Thunberg was not the only voice of discontent at Davos, as many others also shared their views and opinions about the current state of the global environment. The year 2019 saw some of the worst fires in global history, as masses of land were burnt away from California to eastern Australia, along with the lives and livelihoods of man and animal alike. In a time then when global world leaders from the political and business communities have come together in Davos, is this a period of revolution where people stand up to how our planet is being treated, and are the voices demanding action being heard loud enough? Or are we entering a period where trade deals, partnerships, and extensive consumerism will drown out the voices of the voiceless and mean that the future of the global environment will come down to individual contributions to making the world cleaner and greener.
The flavour of the year at Davos is clearly opposition. Whether this is due to climate change, inequality, or even sexism, there are many parties who oppose the ethics of Davos and what it means altogether. The event has seen its timing coincide with one of the largest challenges the world has ever faced. The fires burning in Australia have been argued to have killed over 1.5 billion animals, as well as costing the Australian economy in the region of $5 billion, and it's something the Australians are not happy about at all.
I am standing here a traveller from a new reality, a burning Australia, where amidst the endless falling ash, the thing that is clearest to see is that what was feared and what was warned is no longer in our future.
The target set by global leaders in terms of climate change is to maintain the global temperature levels to below 2 degrees of pre-industrial times. However, with an ever-growing demand for goods, food and services, the emissions we produce as human beings are rising. Yet, what is being done to stop it? Are we genuinely doing enough?
We know that businesses and investment decisions have embraced to some degree the climate risks. We've seen that. However, emissions keep rising, so we're not doing enough.
The protests taking place in Switzerland are attracting a whole host of people, all with their own reasons as to why they're there. So the question is, what can be done to alleviate the world's problems? And is climate change just something that only world leaders should deal with? Do we need a single voice to reach zero? Or should we all be heroes to reach the elusive zero?
We can all be heroes, but for that we have to act together. Like there's no point in saluting Greta and listening to her discourses if we don't try to create motion in the places where we're active.
The future then is in everyone's hands, as the power is slowly grabbed back piece by piece, penny by penny and voice by voice, against inequality, greed and the destruction of the planet.
Davos will no doubt continue each year and bring with it a host of ideas, contributions and good intentions. Yet along with the good, the bad will also prevail. For every Bill Gates' $10 billion vaccination pledge, tens of billions of dollars are being made by rich corporations and personnel on the sidelines of Davos. With Brexit on the horizon, the UK has no doubt lobbied its audiences in the corridors as it strives to find deals in a post-Brexit era. The US and China have also no doubt had their fair share of over-dinner deals with various states and entities. Yet it appears to be the year of the activists at Davos, with headline after headline dedicated to a bitter feud between Greta Thunberg and those responsible for a global environmental disaster, which aside from the cost on lives, is costing economies also. If you would like to share your thoughts and opinions about the show, or want to tell about something in your part of the world, do not hesitate to get in touch with us. Our contact details are on your screens now. Don't forget, you can catch up with Economic Divide anytime by visiting our page on the website where the show is available to watch 24 hours a day. On behalf of me, Kavit Tavway, and the whole team here at Economic Divide, thanks for watching and see you next time.